All right, so let's talk about, well, first of all, hello. Hey, hashtag randomly with Ronnie Jr. You know that that's on the intro. And that's me. So I want to talk about, you know, this series that started off as a book from Michelle Buteau, the comedian extraordinaire, actress, all the things. And I just want to talk about how I enjoyed the show. Survival of the Thickest with Michelle Buteau. Love it. And obviously there's a lot going on in terms of writers and unions and stuff like that I definitely extend such warm and supportive vibes to. But we're going to kind of, for the sake of this, we're going to remove that for a moment and say things like, I do want it to have a second season so it can go there even further. Now, I'm not going to talk about all the things. I think that what you should do is buy Michelle Buteau's book. I think what you should do is watch the Netflix series, watch it a second time just so she could get the streams and get granted a season 2. Now, let's talk about Michelle Buteau in general. So initially, I met Michelle Buteau very briefly years ago. And also, I'm going to, just as a forward momentum, I want to talk about careers. And I do this all the time, so this is not new. But like, you know, the roller coaster that it is. And sometimes it takes one thing, like that thing, maybe even the unexpected thing, and then something kind of takes off. So Michelle Buteau, originally, I met her when I took classes and also worked at the facility that was a broadcast studio in Los Angeles. And so to say that, you know, at that time, again, very brief, wouldn't even say I'm like a friend, more like a colleague, you know, of that time, to Michelle Buteau, to see her work versus like, you know how you could always tell how wonderful someone is based on how great they are when they do their work, because let's say even like doing, like, you know, I work in radio and these types of things, it's like 3, 2, 1 and then you're on. That's great too. But sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with this, people are very reserved, and when they're on, they're on. And I remember being in the room and seeing like just the way Michelle Buteau had a glow about her. Easier said than easy. Like to say it now is like, well, duh, she's like winning. But we all saw it. We all knew. Now here's the thing. And then I'm going to get to Survival of the Thickest and some of the cameos I like in it. I mean, we're going to talk. And we might even talk a little bit about Gabrielle Union's Netflix series with Keith Powers, which I also liked. But that might be later on. So anyways, I remember being in that class. And again, I took class and I also worked at that broadcast facility. This was like a lot of years ago. And this was, you know, because obviously Michelle Buteau, East Coaster, this was in that period of time where she was in Los Angeles. Now, I believe that was at the time after she had done the big comedy show. And I don't know for a fact of any of this, but I imagine it was one of those things where like there was probably a lot of encouragement to like, if you can get down to LA, all of these doors will open up for you. And this is what I'm saying, which I find quite fascinating, is that it really is, it is the survival of the thickest. It's the survival of the fittest. It's the survival of continuing to try. Because imagine, and again, this is just how I saw it. I don't know necessarily if this is exactly the timeline, but I believe she had just done that big show and had a huge reason and relevancy to be in LA and to sort of grab the momentum, you know. I imagine. And while she's there, she's probably, you know, getting little things here and there, and taking class and all these things. But even that, you know, nothing necessarily equates the next big opportunity. So anyways, that was the brief moments that I first was aware of her. But I don't think LA was like a big run for her. I know me personally, I grew up in Southern California, but like I love the 7 years that I've lived collectively in New York has just always been such beautiful. I feel like sometimes my career, opportunity, life in the bedroom, New York is just the place. And so I imagine, and again, these are just thought processes and I did feel like it kind of matched to the storyline. The character that Michelle Buteau played in Survival of the Thickest was Mavis, which I believe is her grandmother's name. And there is a lot of like, okay, do I do this opportunity? Will this lead to this and this? And we'll get to that in a moment. But I imagine, and I would love to, jump on an interview with Michelle Buteau at some point and wonder, like, what was that LA experience like? I mean, and obviously professionally, you probably have to say all the nice things, but let's say we really talk, grab a cup of coffee and really talk, off the record, so to speak. I imagine that LA move was maybe a good experience, but not necessarily like completely fulfilling, and maybe a little bit of a letdown. You want that momentum to lead you to something. And the way this career works, like, she probably was booking a ton of stuff then, and it just doesn't, one project doesn't maybe always work the way you think it will. And it's survival of the thickest. And as a person who has struggled with my weight, forever, this matches so much to me. So this is another reason that I like it. Both having a story of somebody who affirms, like even if I want to lose 30 pounds, that's something I just want to do. Yesterday I walked like 40 blocks, from Hamilton Heights to up on Dykeman, it was like up in Inwood. Like, it was like 40 blocks or something, like 50 blocks. Like, I can want to lose the weight or want to be physically fit and exercise, but I never think that you, in the current moment, should ever, and this is what the show told you, never sell yourself short today. And I bring this up so many times on my shows, so hopefully it doesn't sound redundant if you watch them all, because why wouldn't you? Actually, before we go on, because I really want to get into Survival of the Thickest, the cameos, and an event that I was actually able to support Michelle Buteau in. And again, it's all relative to the term of when was early on in her career. I mean, this is probably like a 25-year career. So this part was progress, but this was progress. It's all leading up to something, right? And I'm going to tell you about a thing that I went to support her. This was like 2014, but that was big at the time. At the time, it was big. So I'll tell you about that in a second. But first, because we are on these platforms, and usually I come at this with the more I want to concentrate on the art and the work. But you know what? It's a business, and I never really prioritize that. So I don't want to tell you to comment and to subscribe. I don't want to do that. I personally don't want to do that. I want to talk more about Michelle Buteau, but first, we have a word.
Well, hello there. Thank you for watching and supporting the show with my good friend, RandomlyRJ Jr. Who the hell am I? Great question. My name is Mark Rodriguez with Mastermind Media, and I wanted to take just a moment of your time to let you know about all the other incredible things this guy, RandomlyRJ Jr. has going on. But first, before we get into that, please comment, like, and subscribe. That is how he grows here on these channels. But one channel you probably don't know about is patreon.com/RandomlyRJ Jr., where he's got a bunch more exclusive content. So please check that out. But speaking of YouTube, let's go back to YouTube for a second. He's got this hashtag, Randomly with Ronnie Jr., and it shows all of his stuff in his days in radio from back in the day, all the way up to present day, and his new interviews, podcasts, just videos across the board. So please check that out, because when you think about content creators, there's millions of content creators, but there's only one, Randomly Ronnie Jr. Let's get back into the show.
Thank you, Mark. Mark has been a fantastic. He has his own business, Mastermind Media. They produce podcasts out of there. They do a ton of other stuff. That's just more the concentration that I know of. That's that's a bond we have, rather. And Mark has been a very instrumental force in, as a friend, but also helping as with a couple consultations as to how I can create good in this space. You know what I mean? It's like one thing, yes, I've done radio, you've in the recent era, you've seen me, sort of if this was Real Housewives, like a friend of a friend of a friend kind of a thing. Like every once in a while, throughout the this recent time, I'm up there at 94.7 The Block with Jonesy in the morning, New York City radio, something that is, of course, so important to me. Anyways, getting to what I was saying, what has been great with Mark and why he's saying hit the Patreon is that he has a level of understanding the business, and he sort of helped me with that. I usually concentrate on the fun stuff, and I'm glad that I now have the wherewithal to be like, but I do need you to also do these things. I need you to support the Patreon, etc., etc. Now back to the lecture at hand, because I thought I was slick. I thought I was so slick there by talking about myself when I should be talking about the great Michelle Buteau and this series. Okay, so, another time I saw Michelle Buteau, this was back in LA. My other coworker at that same location that I'm telling you about went into comedy for a brief moment. This was a girl named Marcy. She still to this day is advocating for plus size also, but she was going into comedy for a brief moment, and Michelle Buteau was the person who was like mentoring her to a degree, or putting her onto a show as like a beginner or whatever, which I thought was so sweet. But I just, thinking back, I remember going, I think it was the comedy location on Melrose to support my friend Marcy, and I remember Marcy really connected with Michelle Buteau in that way. How funny is that? That's another notch why we all want to see Michelle win. Okay, so before I get to Survival of the Thickest, and thank you for sticking around, because I love a tangent, I love to talk, I love long form content as a consumer, so I always have a hard time doing this in 12 seconds, because you don't even, what's 12 seconds? I can't sound interesting in 12 seconds. You can't sound interesting in 12 seconds. And besides, we're going to talk. As Joan Rivers said, can't we talk? So, another thing that I was excited to see in her trajectory of success was it was in September, because it was around my birthday, and I remember seeing on social media that Michelle had a Comedy Central special. Now, listen, this was 2014, 2013, 2011, something of the time. Again, a time where I would have still had a little more of a correspondence with Michelle. Again, acquaintance, maybe, but at the time, I'd still see her around or whatever. So I remember going to the location that she was doing a screening of the Comedy Central special. So again, let's go to these places. And this is why it gets so fascinating to see now she has this show. She's at the helm of it, and it's successful. People like it. People like Michelle Buteau's Survival of the Thickest. So it's so exciting to see all of these levels. And I think it should be a little bit of knowledge for you, whatever you are pursuing. You could be in education. You could be gearing up to go into being a firefighter. I think it's still a universal principle that it's going to go and then it's going to stop. And then it's going to go and it's going to stop. And then you're like, oh, this is going to be the opportunity that goes. But it doesn't necessarily. And then you could do something that you don't think goes, and it does. And finally, everybody, in terms of the industry, takes you seriously. You've not changed. You've had the skill set forever. I often talk about that with my career. When will it go? Anyways, what I'm saying is it was really cool. It was at a spot close to NYU. It was a basement restaurant location or whatever, and it was really cool to see her celebrate her Comedy Central special of that time. And again, as I was saying, yes, a special on Comedy Central is you hear a lot of comedians now, they don't even want to do it, which is a little crazy to me. And I understand that you could do the exact same thing and also create a ton of monetization for yourself doing it independently. I know that, and I do get that. However, I do think that it's excuse me, I gotta check my phone. I gotta make sure I didn't get a good career email. Okay, anyways, back to what we're talking about. It seems like there was a turn where people were like, F doing a Netflix special or a Comedy Central special. I'd rather have ownership of my own. And all that's great too, and I think you should have both. I still pursue and have worked with a lot of things that I'm trying to do or I have done in the world of production, because I've worked in production a while, or radio. I'm very into doing it all. It's I will take a radio gig and a production gig and also work the independent space as well. So all I'm saying is, at that time, people were pretty much still taking quite seriously, if you did a Comedy Central special, it was amazing. So Michelle Buteau had the Comedy Central special. I was lucky enough to go see her and chat with her just for a brief moment, which was really sweet of her. What a moment to see and witness. As like I said, an acquaintance, but let's say a fan of her work, I'm thinking, this is the moment. This Comedy Central, it's going to catapult her. I mean, again, already a success. Already like doing this and then doing that and doing that. But like, I'm thinking it's going to go. And, you know, who knows? Maybe it was something that was very valuable to her career. I don't know. Sometimes you do things that don't go, maybe, but it leads you to meet somebody or collaborate with somebody. So it's all part of, like I say, that trajectory. It's all part of it. So anyways, she had done stuff and, you know, popping up here, popping up there. And I don't know. I would love to sit down and do a little bit of either a coffee and just, you know, soak up that game in terms of career and passion and continuing to never give up on yourself, or an interview. But I would like to do an interview. And if I did, I would say, like, what were those moments like? You know, doing the LA run, doing the Comedy Central special, which again, people don't value it as much today, but at that time it was supposed to be big for you. Maybe it was big for her. I don't know. But I would love to hear, like, was that the thing that you thought was going to take you there? And I'd also love to hear what she thinks, because then over the years, like, you know, again, popping up here, there, everywhere, and as a fan of her work, I was like, oh, all these things are happening, but like you're not waiting for anything. You're just like watching it and observing. And you're like, oh, good for her, you know. Just like tons of the people that I've worked in radio with, and, you know, I've lived in LA forever as well. So I know a lot of people who, like, you're just excited to see all of your friends win, or colleagues win, or people you've even taken class with win. You don't got to know them. You just love the fact that people put in the work and it's happening for them. So over the course of the years, I don't know, like, maybe she was like completely thriving. I don't know. And I would love to know if she ever were to be able to, like, isolate and locate an exact moment that it, like, really hit and it sort of changed. But I will say, as a viewer of this moment, I kind of believe, though she was doing a ton of stuff. Now, was she doing? BET Plus had a revival of First Wives Club. I'm wondering, because this would be staggering. This would be really crazy. It seems like she might have already been doing that. And again, success. I mean, you're doing a show opposite Jill Scott, like a huge success. But still, the career still requires auditioning and waking up and pounding the pavement. Like, it's a hard career. So anyways, I don't know where, or if she even, if she even defines a moment. But I gotta say, in terms of when it felt like, and I would love to know if she thinks this too, because maybe I'm way off base. It felt like, as a viewer and a fan of the work, and seeing her through all the years, like, you know, all these projects, it felt like when that show, coming into a time where everyone's isolated in their home, you know, the world changed that March of 2020. And I believe that was around the time that The Circle on Netflix came out. Now, initially she started as the voiceover, but because she is so good at what she does, the voiceover couldn't contain the greatness that was her. So Michelle Buteau became, sort of in that moment, not that she wasn't before, but a household name. Again, this would be a question I'd ask her, like, was that the moment? Or was this the moment? Or, like, you know, was maybe 25 years ago, whenever she started her career, you know, a lesson she learned from her family. Maybe that was the moment, because it's never one thing. But it certainly was, in my eyes, that Netflix, The Circle, was really big at that time. Was it called The Circle? Yeah, The Circle. And I felt like it was like really, because, then she did that VH1 show. Remember, she was doing like a morning talk show. I think that was even before the Netflix, The Circle. So again, they're all contributing factors, and this is for all of us, my career, your career, whoever. Like, all of it, even if you get on this moment and you think this is going to be the moment that takes me, it might not. It might not. But the stick with itness, you have to stick with it. The stick with itness is what is going to win, essentially. And it's not about winning or losing. It's about showing up for yourself, because this industry, or all these industries, whatever you're doing, there's many reasons to stop. There's many reasons to pivot, and pivoting is okay, but there's many reasons to, like, just give up. And I'm just like, again, these are all questions I'd maybe ask in an interview, because you know, you turn on the TV, you're like, oh wow, like a VH1 morning talk show, like, you know, like Kelly Ripa and Regis Philbin type show definitely like younger, and I think Nick Lachey was at the helm of it or something like that. So you'd think that's maybe the big moment, but it really does feel like it was Netflix's The Circle that kind of changed the game for her. I might be wrong about this. Maybe it was, she's a mother now, and it's all the stuff that feeds your soul to create the art, etc. So there's no one moment, but I definitely remember the name Michelle Buteau became a bigger name. And so then again, you see her here, there, everywhere. And so with that being said, remember she did the episode of Watch What Happens Live with Dwayne Wade. That was so funny. That could even be a contributing factor, but it's just fun to see. What is interesting is that within all that now lands a moment based on, I believe, a book of essays, Survival of the Thickest, that gets optioned into a TV show. So I have wasted so much of your time, unless you love what I do, and by talking about a ton of stuff. But I just thought, me personally, I thought it was all important. I think it's all important. And there is a level of motivation somewhere in this episode. If you could see it and if you could feel it, take it. You know what I mean? And what I love about Survival of the Thickest is we have a couple things. I'm 42 now, so we have how many stories are really aged to somebody who's 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, like not as much. But also, if there is, it might not be, well, I guess based on the story through the trailer, so I won't give too much, just through the trailer, she has to readjust and sort of change her life based on something that happened. Survival of the Thickest is basically the story of the girl who's about 37, 38 years old, who finds her 5-year relationship, her boyfriend, or maybe they were fiancés, and he was dipping and doing, as Wendy Williams used to say. And so she has to like restart her life. And I thought it was, just for me personally, I thought it was so powerful, because I can't tell you how many times that little bit of white noise that comes into your mind of insecurity, based on not your insecurity, but on societal standards of you shouldn't keep going, or you're at a certain age, you don't follow your dream. It's baffling to me, because I know ever since I was a child, I always wanted to, host a talk show. And I'm not going to abandon that. I'm going to get there. But sometimes you do feel like I am too old to do this. And that is just based on the certain lifestyle stereotypes that are put on you. So Mavis, the character, which I believe is named after her grandmother, it was refreshing. I mean, in the vein of something really challenging that the character went through, that she did have to readjust her life, and that so much of that readjustment, maybe not at the beginning, was, I'm still going to keep going. I'm still going to keep going. I'm still going to keep going. It was about a career and building a career in the show. She's a stylist. But it was also about, I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to still believe in myself. I mean, the character didn't say based on this age, but it would have been easier to go a safer route. You just get a situation where you're going to break up because of a cheating situation, and you're going to go off on your own. You sometimes look at it, you say, I'm 38 years old, let me do something that's a little more safe. The character Mavis did not. And it was, for me, it was inspiring. So I try to look at it like that. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, am I loving this show because I want to see Michelle Buteau win? And she is, of course, winning. Or did this hit me? And it did. It did. I'm 42 years old. I've had, even in a polite way, but it still hits you. Relatives, oh, you're still at that. And it's but if you know where I'm going, my own trajectory, giving up would be a sin. It would be crazy to do that. It would be so crazy. Hold on, I gotta look at my phone again. Okay, sorry, there's deals and opportunities happening, but I gotta okay, back to you. So that was one of the big principles that I really loved about the show. That really made me happy to see it. And it was also kind of cool. I mean, I guess it would be too stereotypical to just make the character a comedian, because that's what, Michelle Buteau is, essentially. But I thought the stylist role was interesting. It reminds me of that friend that I mentioned, Marcy Guevara. who, again, still advocates in the plus size world. She had once done a funny reality show on VH1 about having a certain level of access and kind of getting it stripped away and like finding out who you are at the core. Why did I bring her up? Oh, I brought her up because one of the things that I could reflect on with my friend Marcy, who's tried everything, I said she tried comedy or whatever, is that when I worked on a TV show called American Latino TV as a segment producer, I remember we interviewed Marcy. And Marcy's conversation in the plus size world is probably different. I don't even know who is considered plus size or what, I don't know any of that. But I don't know if, Survival of the Thickest has some type of indication of, being a full figure and still loving on yourself. And I thought it was really cool that years ago that when I talked to my friend Marcy on a segment that we did for American Latino TV, she said something that was so powerful. And I think that this Mavis character sort of also gave a lot of that. And that was, because we're asking a bunch of questions. And one of the things at the end, Marcy said in our segment about her being, coming from the reality show, learning about herself and being plus size and what to do with that. I remember her saying something like, well, what are you going to do until you lose that 15 to 30 pounds that you're adamant on losing? Not live your life? No.
Women need to know that are much more than a muumuu or a drape to cover them from head to toe. I want to help them dress right at the body and the size they're in now. Because what are you going to do until you lose that 5 pounds? Sit at home and cry? No, you have to live your life.
And I remember being as somebody who has gained and lost, and gained. Over 40, the metabolism tends to be my arch nemesis. But I think that's important. I think that is so important. What are you going to do? You're going to sit on the sidelines until you get that body you need to get, or that job you need to get, or that apartment you need to get. You can have the mental, like you could have it in that mental Rolodex, like this is what I want to work on, sure. But I'm not going to give the satisfaction to anybody that you, like I can't walk in the room and say, like I can't bag who I want to bag, so to speak, Like I should feel like I should take a shot. Oh, look at the cutie over there. Oh, look at the cutie over there. Oh, look at the, like I should still, feel like I shouldn't wallow and be like, oh, well, I'm not really worthy because, gained, 30 pounds and da-da-da-da. No, you are a baddie. And so this is what I'm saying. Like, this was why it was so good to see this show. And I do hope Netflix does get to bring it back when the time is right. A couple, because I don't want to go into the storyline that much, but some valuable things that did come up on the show. And even I've been on a, what is it called when you do like a deep dive of all of Michelle Buteau's interviews. And I loved that I saw one where a couple things about this. First of all, we've all always heard and seen the guy, the comedian Tone Bell, I believe is his name. But I don't know that I've ever seen him in a role like this. And this was to be so fascinating. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily worded out in the series, but in the press run with Michelle and Garcelle Bouvet and everybody, I remember watching one of 40 interviews. I mean, Michelle was everywhere. She was on The View promoting the show. And they were talking about how, like, it could have been so easy to create the best friend, which is Tone Bell, a very sensitive, artistic man named Khalil. In theory, sometimes people could think like, oh, he would be the one to like end up with her at the end. And I don't remember the exact words that Michelle had stated in terms of this, but it was something along the lines of like, no, we can have somebody that you care and love, and it is the friendship. It's not always, well, it maybe could lead to this, gay men. Like I could have tons of my wonderful gay friends, and like it's not a, oh, but one day, no. And there was other ways probably they could have done the show. They could have made the man in her life in terms of a best friend, they could have made him a gay best friend. Very cliche, also cool, but also no. And it was kind of a really fun character to watch Khalil, who was a little bit of a womanizer, but sort of like in an artistic way, because he was an artist, because he was very like anti-commerce, and you've got to feel it with the soul, but he was feeling the souls. And he evolves, of course, which is a great storyline. But I was really like taken to the character. Maybe I just thought he was cute. I was taken to the character because I had only kind of seen his work, but I didn't really see. I've not seen a character like this from him, which I thought was just like a little bit different. Maybe he has work like this elsewhere. I just have not seen it. And then I do really think it was valuable that they are best friends, like family, like a brother to her, to the Mavis character. And I thought it kind of does need to be said. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of does need to be said, because get out of here with this. You're only valuable to me in as a potential conquest. Like, no, as the New Yorkers say, the fuck out of here. No. So I thought that was really cool. Tasha Smith was in the show. She played a slightly older, very successful corporate world, but also was like discovering some stuff about her. Now, two people in, I guess you would say, like the drag race world, so to speak. And I've had the great honor of being around previous years. Well, first of all, Peppermint was in it. And Peppermint I met 100 years ago when I first moved to New York, and it was one of the first events that I worked, because I was working events when I first got to New York City, when I first got here. And coincidentally, we lived in the same neighborhood of that time. And one of the events that I did, I was working events, but I was a transportation this particular run of show. And it was a multiple days. And it was actually like Kenneth Cole. It was the Cole Haan Pump, and it was some marketing campaign, very like experiential marketing. So what they did, and I think it was along the lines of like when the TV show Drag Race, like season 5, was blowing up. So whoever of that time, this was like 2011 maybe. They decided for the marketing experience, they were going to have drag queens. And obviously this was years ago, so that the terminology does not necessarily make sense. Sorry, just to be clear, for the brilliant Peppermint, who is just fantastic. So I'm not equating the term as that for Peppermint. But anyways, let me just get to the part. That was what the campaign was. So Peppermint was, as a performer, was hired to be there. Where I was also doing transportation for Willem. I was doing transportation for Manila Luzon. Like, it was, and tons of New York girls too. Kitten with the Whip. We know Kitten with the Whip. Now Bob the Drag Queen. So it was just a wonderful experience, and it's just so funny that the out of all of the people we were around, both the production and the locations, the team at Kenneth Cole, out of all the people, the person that I connected with immediately was Peppermint. I mean, maybe because we lived in the exact same neighborhood, it could have been that. I mean, I remember there was a time, years flashing forward, Peppermint recognized me, in the street or whatever, and was like, hey, I haven't seen you in a couple years, and wow, are you settling in? And it was just so wonderful. So I've always had that sort of bond with Peppermint, and this was several years before Peppermint became the first trans woman to do Drag Race. Obviously Monica Beverly Hills. Well, this is all a tangent, but anyways, this was years before the access to that TV show. But I always really took to Peppermint just as a New York City, the resume, you know what I mean? Like, and just, it really felt nice. And so to see Drag Race and the Broadway show and this and that and this, it's just so wonderful. And actually, right here on the channel, one of my very first episodes, Peppermint was so gracious to be a guest on one of my initial episodes, which was actually very hard because when you start a project, you don't really have like numbers at all. I mean, technically I still don't, but like I have a show. And I thought it was really sweet that Peppermint did my show, and we had a ton of fun. We talked about everything.
And so between 2004 and 2005, I was releasing new music, I was traveling, I had dancers, I had a band, and I was just kind of getting myself in a bunch of different things. I think one of the ways that I remember first meeting was on a kind of a promotional activation where there was some other drag queens, Manila from Drag Race, Willem from Drag Race, and a couple other girls. And that was our first time meeting. That was, I don't remember, that was probably like 2010.
You are 11, yeah.
Something like that. But yeah, that was like just, I was able to do a lot of different things because of the kind of the work that I put into my drag. It was a shoe company that we were doing something for, if you remember. And I was getting more and more opportunities like that. And so I think it was not only, obviously Drag Race has certainly kind of made everything in Technicolor, but even before Drag Race, I think people were starting to realize that queens, drag queens, and people who did drag were talented in so many different areas that you could kind of, you know, utilize them not only at the bar, but also during the day, at an event, in a commercial, as a brand ambassador, doing some type of promotional activation where they're like standing on the corner and talking about whatever your products. And so it just, there ended up being so many different opportunities and places where I could at least have a platform. And that was really interesting to me.
Going back to that time, yeah, it was an event that Peppermint was she was the talent. I was working in the production side. I was working a lot of transportation at the moment. And this was like right when I moved to New York. You know, it's such a great time to even think back to, because so much has changed. You were talking about sort of getting out the nightlife stuff. Not that you didn't continue it, but like now MTV, everyone's like looking how they could infuse drag queens into their product. You know, this was a Cole Haan promotion for the Chelsea pump. I remember it as if it was yesterday. But what was so interesting and warm-hearted about you was you were essentially, I think we worked about 5 days together, you and I. Willem was also in our vehicle as well. And it was so many great things we'll attribute to this, but it was such a welcoming to New York City. So you really were one of the first people I knew. And I just really had this a bit fish out of water component, you know, like, whoa, New York is just different. And then I think it was such a blessing that I had you and Willem, you know, as my people.
Now, here's a little quandary riddle mystery. Why does peppermint smell like cinnamon?
Because every time I wear peppermint fragrance, people say, girl, who's wearing Vicks Vapor Rub? Not cute.
Okay, so I'm loving that Peppermint's in there. I'm loving that there is such a variety, a beautiful variety of queer representation weaved in so naturally that we do live and feel in New York City. You know, like I said, the places I've lived in New York, you know, Harlem, Hamilton Heights, Weehawken, New Jersey, Astoria for a month, and a lot of time also in Bushwick, Ridgewood, those areas. And like the way so seamlessly, like CeCe Bloom's felt like experiences that we've all had, you know what I mean? And it was the thing that this show was really wonderful at, and I want to make sure I hopefully word this the correct way, but it's like all of these things that could be worded as like, oh, well, this was different because we don't really see all these things. Well, that's the sad part. We don't see all these things. But what was great is they weren't, oh God, let me come after this show. They weren't weaved in a way that Sex and the Cities and just like that season 1 was, where it was like, we're going to try too hard to uplift these issues, but like it didn't feel natural. And so with all of the stuff that was going on, I mean, I love the last episode. I won't tell you anything about the choices that the Mavis character made and where she sort of took potential big money career versus something that was passionate to her, and the way that was weaved in so beautifully. I mean, bravo to Michelle and the team over there. And of course, yes, Peppermint was part of a lot of that, you know. Well, there's a really interesting moment that happens with Garcelle Bouvet's character, who plays, you know, a model who was, you know, had a huge name in the 90s and is still adapting to, you know, the newness of the 2020s, and maybe, you know, her body not being what it once was, but still gorgeous. And this is why the Mavis character really gave a lot to the character, to I think it was Natasha was the name of the Garcelle Bouvet's character. It was a perfect fit because, you know, I think the people who identify themselves in the beauty world, sometimes that identity of beauty is really a little constraining, you know. And I thought, again, naturally, very naturally, it was weaved in a way where the empowerment that Mavis, Michelle Buteau's character, was able to give to somebody like Natasha, who maybe wouldn't have looked and explored and opened up herself in those ways. It felt like a real conversation. And I also think, probably, Michelle and Garcelle seem like they are buddies in real life. Like they feel like they really do laugh a ton. Okay, another, and I said back to the Drag Race world, RuPaul's Drag Race. Another character that was more, not in the entire series, but we saw the wonderful Michelle Visage. So Michelle Visage worked with comedian Sinbad. We all remember Sinbad. Of course, he had some health struggles, but comedian Sinbad was phenomenally big in that era, the 80s and the 90s. And the very first radio station I ever worked at, Sinbad was the host, and Michelle Visage was the co-host. Later on, Michelle Visage ended up leading the morning show. And this was after she came from KTU, working with RuPaul, and all the other stuff she did. She did Florida radio. She done a ton of stuff. But this was the time that I met her. I'm a young 21-year-old soaking up a couple things. Radio is the thing I want to be in, so there's that. It's the first time I'm ever going to a job, and you're showing up at a job, and oh, Beyonce's coming to the radio station. I remember it like it was yesterday. So that's an empowering thing in general, and that's where I initially met Michelle Visage, and later worked a couple of her drag cons within the booth. Just staying in touch with her and offering to help out or whatever. And it's so beautiful to see Michelle Visage at DragCon, because I'm going to tell you something, and you all know it's true. Michelle Visage has been in and done this industry early. I don't think she drinks, and she's on time everywhere. I remember that from radio back in 2001. At KHHT, Clear Channel, which Clear Channel is now iHeart, all those years ago in 2002 rather. But one thing, this is just a nod to Michelle Visage. Michelle Face. Visage's face. One thing that I want to just say, because this is why I felt like it was the perfectly casted show. Michelle Visage we'd work DragCon with her. We'd work in her booth. It was exhilarating. It was a hard shift because it was a lot of work. But we worked. We worked and worked and worked. And I want to say something that I think is showcasing, if you are cut from that cloth from yesteryear, you not only enjoy and embrace your moments of being up, but you also don't take them for granted. And Michelle Visage is up. She is on Emmy nominated or Emmy award winning show. And, she's had her music back in the day. It's Michelle Visage she's that girl. But when I would work DragCon with her, I worked the LA one and the New York one. And she always would be fantastic with every fan that came through, she had a long line. Obviously there were a couple drag queens from the show that maybe just came off a win that they had huge lines, but Michelle Visage's line was huge too. But you'd see some of these other contestants on this show building out their careers. There's nothing wrong with that, but they'd be sitting. They'd not necessarily do anything but a quick head nod to the fan that just paid to see them and meet them, and meet and greet style. Whereas Michelle Visage, who is actually on the show every season, she treated and I'm not saying this to gas up Michelle Visage. I'm saying this because I think it's cool. I'm saying this because I witnessed Michelle was there. It was me, Jody, Cesar Valentino. She had mentioned Cesar Valentino a lot. Working Michelle Visage's booth along with Michelle's husband, David. And she gave so much to each and every person who took the time to come up to her. She made sure if they didn't I don't know if she did this all the time, but if maybe someone didn't like the photo, she gave, let's take a second one. She just gave a lot. And she stood the entire time. There was something so beautiful about that to me. So while sometimes I'm I think Michelle Visage should be in just even a bigger household name or whatever the case, I can say that you can tell there's always something special when somebody really, really gets and knows this business in and out, respects it, and doesn't take any of it for granted. You know what I mean? And that's not to say like, oh, I got here luckily. No, we have all put in the work based on our achievements and failures and achievements and failures. But like, and I feel like I got a little bit of that too. I'm growing more into that where I'm like, even when things go great, like the Mavis character, it's like, I'm not taking any of it for granted because I know what, I don't know, when you involve in this business, it's pretty crazy. Anyways, let's not talk about all of that, but I thought it was cool to see Michelle Visage in it. I thought it was cool to see Peppermint was in it a little bit more. But there was also cameos from Buteau Lane, who is a phenomenal comedian. Nicole Byer, another phenomenal comedian. Michelle Buteau did a podcast with the comedian Carlos something. He was in it. I can't recall his last name at the moment, but he's very funny. So everything just really matched up. And I think I've heard in interviews Michelle Buteau talking about, you just want to work with people that work well. I'm putting my own spin on this, but it was something like, but also you want to work with your friends who make sense to the project. And I thought I felt that. As a viewer, I felt like, oh, this was work, sure, probably long hours, all of it, but I felt like there was still like a really cool factor about doing this show. So anyways, you're always going to win me with the New York City show. You're always going to win me with, a different concept that doesn't always get to be seen. Shouldn't even really be a shocking thing. Okay, I'm not a size, what is it? I'm not a size 2. But I love myself. Like, no, that should always be. Like, none of this should really be a shock, but the fact that it is saying something, but at least it was there. And I hope the viewing audiences really dive into it, tweet about it, and that collectively everyone hopes for a season 2. Because the way it ended, but I won't tell you the song, but I love that song. And by the way, not the one artist, but the male artist of that song, you'll have to watch to the end now. He grew up in a neighborhood near where I grew up. So that's fascinating. I remember his career. This is just in the last episode. Talking about careers and trajectories and pivots and changes. This artist, and you'll get to it when you watch it, this artist initially had a song that was a little bit more like a I don't want to call anyone a knockoff. It was just a different lane. It was Get Your Hands Up, it was called. That was more like a Chris Brown sound. And then now he's become this phenomenal artist that I love so much. But years ago, earlier on, when I interviewed him several times, he was still, as we all are, finding and defining, before like it really connects. And that's what I was saying with Michelle Buteau. It's like, when did it really connect? There's all these little moments, and then like bam, and then luckily that moment, that connection allows you to have those open doors to make the things that you want to make. So it's very inspiring. It's inspiring for me to make a show that works for some of the things that I've struggled with or have overcame or I'm happy about or I feel like isn't usually spoken about. It really opened up my mind in that way. That's really all I got. Credit to this cool show that came from a book, Survival of the Thickest. And hopefully in your normal day-to-day life, if you put on a little extra weight, you have that mental like, yeah, but I'm still cute. Yeah, I'm still relevant to take up space, and it's a. I mean, as a lot of these shows say, they're universal messages. But if it happens to be exactly connected to a lot of things you do, for me it was the New York. For me it was the variety of friends. For me it was the, I won't give away, but there's like a pivotal choice to be made in terms of you go this lane, career, money, you go this lane, I'm more married to my mission. What is my mission? What is my goal? Why did I even start all this? Something I got to think about every day. And I think I've found a way to kind of center back in. There's been many times I've been off. There's been many times you've been off. But luckily, when you open up your mind and you get busy and put in the work, you will find a time to sort of recenter And then you can now open up and tell the world what it is that you're trying to do. And that way you can give your art. You know, the character of, again, I'm not giving away a ton of stuff, but these are things that to be brought up. The character of Khalil, played by Tone Bell, was interesting being around Marley, Tasha Smith, because Marley's, some of her achievements were career only. So she's like so far on that side, like work as identity. Whereas Khalil may be too far on the other side. It was all about the art, which there's times where I'm like very much in that. Like, you know, like I've had people say, do you even want to win? And I'm like, what do you mean by that? They're like, well, you're not doing all this and that and this and that. I'm like, yeah, but I got like 800 episodes on my podcast. Like, I'm putting in the work, but there's ways to like do it, but a lot of them don't align within my principles. You know, I'm never doing one of the exposing somebody. I mean, I'll give a little shady comment, you know what I mean? But it's just, there's ways to win in this with Tone Bell as Khalil. His character was like, for me, this is the Khalil character. It's not always about commerce. And so like Marley was like, wait, what? So there's two kinds of people. And I thought it was good to have both sides because you can center in on where you are with that. You know? So it was good. It was good. It was good. Rate it as you must. 1 out of 5 stars or 1 through 10. Throw that in the comments and let's have fun with this. And it's cool to support somebody who has been having a big career for so many years and now is executive producer of this great Netflix series, Survival of the Thickest. Congratulations to Michelle Buteau, the entire production team that put in the long hours and gave a wonderful show. All right, until next time, this has been #randomly with Ronnie Jr. Go search along my, my show, my episodes, and do some likes and comments and, subscriptions or whatever you got to do. But more importantly, let's get on that Patreon and make it rain. Patreon.com/randomly Ronnie Jr. It's been a long one. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I love to talk, and I hope that this was insightful or helpful or gave you something in your mind, even if it's just to watch the show, that like gave you some motivation and made you say, I'm gonna thrive. Because that's the thing, you got to get out of your own head. We're here to win. Don't let the insecurities, that white noise, don't let it come in. Don't let it fester. Remember, just like Mavis, you're a baddie. And watch her be a baddie. Some wonderful romantic scenes, we'll call it. And it's not all, again, doesn't make sense that this is such a big deal, but there's not always certain body types on camera. They can be on camera to be funny. They can be on camera to be, a friend, but, never like, oh gosh, don't show them, owning their, the romantic side of the, and it just is, if you look at it from that angle, it's just really good to see. So I was proud of it. Let me find out I become an actor and we put this sexy body on a Netflix series. Let me stick to what I'm good at. Podcasting, YouTube, radio, podcast consulting. Let's stay in my lane. But imagine of all of this. Oh, I'm just kidding. I gotta go. Survival of the Thickest. Check it out. And send an Instagram to Michelle Buteau and let her know that you love the show. When one wins, we all win. So let's go. Okay, later.
Hey, Ronnie Jr.